Hi everybody, welcome to the November edition of In Stitches with Mary. I'm glad you're joining me. I am Mary and I have got some holiday projects here to get you inspired for Thanksgiving and Christmas coming up. For a couple of projects I want to highlight, I've got my little gobble time turkey here made from felt. We've got a little grab and go bowl I think is going to be fun. And then of course my featured project, which is our Mary Checkered Christmas quilt. Just a cute little one, and it is perfect for playing checkers with the kids or chess if you would like. So let's get started and see how these go together. Okay, so the first project I want to show you today is what I call my Mary Checkered Christmas quilt. It is perfect if you want to play checkers with the kids, the grandkids, play chess with whoever is your best chess partner, I guess. And so I'm going to show you how this goes together. It takes 3 blocks. The big one in the middle, of course, is our checkered board. You're going to have a Christmas tree block, and then we have our corner blocks with 1.5 inch sashing on all the way around. So let's get started and see how this goes together. So let's start with our corner block. You're going to make 4 of these, and these are going to go into each corner of our quilt. What you'll need is a square, a 4¼ inch square for each block. So you're going to need to cut 4 of those. And we're going to diagonally cut those so that we end up with 4 triangles. So you can see I drew my diagonal lines there, and you're going to just slice that so that you have 4 triangles. I'm going to lay these out here because we're going to use them. So you're going to use those 4 triangles, and then you're going to need to cut 2 reds and 2 creams. These are strips that measure 2 5/8 inches by 5 1/8. All right, and you're going to cut 4, 2 of each, and these have to be cut. We're going to cut a diagonal on here so that we have this edge here. To do that, you're going to use a 45-degree angle on your ruler and lay that across the top of your strip, and from an upper corner down to the side you're going to cut that off. My hint here is that you lay all of them together. So I've got my 2 reds and I have my 2 creams, and I'm going to lay them all together and make sure that they are all face up. We don't want any wrong sides together or right sides together, or you're going to end up with a left and a right piece, and you don't want that. They should all be the same. So put all 4 of them together at the same time. I wouldn't go any thicker than that. And lay that 45-degree line on there and cut across. Okay? So for right now, what I want you to do is imagine that I did cut that. Then I want you to take this to the sewing machine and lay it out. We've got our 4 triangles here, and we've got our 2 reds and 2 creams. And you're going to lay these out much like the picture shows in my directions. And it kind of creates a little bit of a pinwheel. A little. It's a whole lot of a pinwheel. Remember, let's fold that under. Remember that has been sliced off. The green triangles come in to each of these corners now. All right. Let me get those placed in there. So there is how our block is going to sew together. But get this over by your sewing machine and place it there so that you can see and you're doing each step correctly. The first thing you'll do is to sew your green triangles onto each of these shorter edges now. Remember, we've got the long side. We slice this off. We've got a shorter side here. That's where the green triangle is going to get sewn on into that 1/4 inch stitch. So you're going to do all 4 of those first, and then press them towards the green. Just go ahead and press them. When you get done, press them towards the dark side, the green side, and then they're all going in the same direction. When you have that finished, what you will see, let's lay these out. I've got these stitched together here already. See if I can lay it correctly for you. It's a little different working upside down. So here's what you'll have. So these are now sewn on, and we press them towards the green triangle. The next thing you want to do is to go ahead and sew the two triangles together here. And that's why I'm going to lay it this way. And I prefer to sew it onto the seamed edge here to the red, so that when we get all done, we're going to press to the dark side again, and that dark side will be the red strip. And we're also then pressing towards the side of least resistance. We got a seam here. We don't want to press towards the seam. We want to press towards this side that doesn't have a seam. So when you get that done, then you're going to go ahead and sew this side together. By pressing towards the red side, our corners are going to nestle together when we sew them, and you're going to have a nice sharp point in your corner. So that's what you want to do. I went ahead and pressed my seam open. If you have a special way of pressing those seams open, that's what you can do, but I pressed mine open, and let that lay nice and flat. So that's our corner block, and you're going to do that 4 times. Okay, now that we have our corner blocks done, we're going to start on our tree blocks. You're going to need to make 12 of these. There are 3 on each of the 4 sides. So let me show you how this goes together and what you're going to need for that. The top row, there's 3 rows to our blocks. The top row requires 2 green and 2 creams. Now these are, the green squares are all going to be 2.5 inches by 2.5 inches. The cream squares are all going to be 2.5 inches, but each one's going to have a different length to it. So our first row, this one is going to be 3 inches long. Our second row requires 3 green squares. Let me lay those out. And these are all 2.5 inch squares, and 2 creams that are 2.5 inch squares. And then our last row is our tree trunk. And this requires a 1.5 inch by 2.5 inch brown tree trunk. And these are 2.5 by 3.5 inches. To put it together, again, I like to have them all laid out by my sewing machine, so I'm getting them in the right order and sewing them together. We're going to place our green squares, this is the top of the tree, we're going to place our green squares right side down, and you're going to have the edges meet in the center. So remember, our cream was 1/2 inch longer. This was 3 inches instead of 2.5. We want that to extend over and draw a diagonal line from the center corner up here to the opposite corner. And you're going to do that on both, and you're going to stitch on that line. When you get done, we're going to press this side down. Well, before you press, you'll want to trim 1/4 inch below that line. But I like to press first, so I'm sure I'm pressing in the right direction and we don't trim off on the wrong side of that stitching line. So we're going to press that way and then go ahead and trim off that excess. The same thing for the other side, and that's why we've got them lined up so that we are going in the correct direction and we have a point to our tree. So when those are sewn together, our first row, the top row, will finish off like this, and then you'll sew those two together, right sides together. We've got our point up there, and press that seam open. We'll press that seam open. Now our middle row is fairly simple. These are all going to be the outside, the green and the cream. These you're going to sew the same way there. You are going to do half square triangles. All right, and then let me flip these over and do it this way. And then you're going to trim, just like you did this one. You're going to trim that off and fold those down, press the dark side down, and you're going to have the sides of your tree. So those will get pressed down, and then these two will get pressed or stitched to the center, and that will look like this when it's finished. So our tree is starting to come together. The bottom row is very, very simple. Each of the creams are going to get stitched to each side of our tree trunk. And when you get that done, it will look like this. So I pressed towards the dark side so we don't have those shadows on the lighter fabric. I pressed these towards the center, the same thing, and then these were pressed open. Then we're going to sew those 3 rows together. Now, when you get these sewn together, you're going to make 12 of them. 4 seams will all be pressed down, and 12 of the blocks, the seams are going to be pressed up, or opposite directions anyway. So 4, those 4 are each going to be your center tree on each side of the quilt. And then the other 8 will be the outside trees. And the reason I'm telling you to do that is so that when you sew those 2 together, those seams will nestle again. And this seam will be up, the block next to it, the seam will be down, and you'll have a nice sharp point in your corner. They nestle together, and they're so easy to sew together that way. So you're going to sew 3 trees together. The center tree, the seams are pressed in a different direction. Okay? And you do 4 rows like that. So we'll have 3 of them put together for each side. Okay, the last thing we need to do before we can put our quilt together is to make our checkered board. And this is really simple to do. It's 2.5-inch squares of light and dark fabric. Now I chose my colors. You can choose your colors, whatever you would like to use. But you're going to need 32 of each color. And there's 8 rows to it. So you're going to need 4 light and 4 dark of each color in each row, and you're going to sew them together. Press the seams towards the dark squares. Again, I'm going to use that word nestle. When we go to sew our rows together, those seams are going to nestle right into each other, and we get a nice sharp corner seam. Make sure when you go to sew your rows together that you turn one around so that we're alternating our colors going down the rows as well as alternating across, so you get that true checkerboard. All right, now we're ready to assemble the quilt. All right, assembling this quilt is pretty easy. We're going to start with our checkerboard. We're going to add in a 1.5-inch strip border, and then we're going to add in 2 strips of our trees. Remember, we sewed our tree blocks together, 3 together. You're going to sew 2 of those, 1 on each side. And then the other 2 sets of trees, before we put those on, we're going to sew our corner blocks onto each end of those. That becomes our outside row as well. And so those will get sewn on to each of the other 2 sides. Add in another 1.5-inch border. If you want a wider border, go ahead and add a wider border. That's totally up to you. This finishes out at 32 by 32 inches square. So it's a nice little table topper. All that's left to do is to quilt and bind and find your checkers or chest set. So I hope you enjoy this Christmas. We'll see you soon. If you are interested in any of the patterns that I've shown here in this video series, you are welcome to call the store and we can get those sent out to you. They are just $5 each, and we can get those out to you either by email in a PDF format, or we can send a paper copy through the mail. Just give us a call.